Rise of Red is the Disney Plus spinoff to Disney Channel's Descendants. Don't get me wrong, it is a Descendants story, it just isn't Mal's story. Josanne McGibbon and Sarah Perriott wrote Mal's story, all three of them, but they didn't have any part in Red's story. Beyond the Isle of the Lost came out just this past May, predating the movie by a couple of months. As with all of De La Cruz's Isle of the Lost novelizations, it tells the backstory of the starting BK. Only Red's backstory isn't on the Isle, as all the other backstories have been. Red's story is in Wonderland. Before Beyond the Isle of the Lost, the only mention we've seen of Wonderland in the Descendants world is through Allie in Wicked World. She's the daughter of Alice. It is quite clear that Alice doesn't live in Wonderland, though she did once fall through the rabbit hole. Alice must be in Auradon now with her daughter. So why isn't Wonderland in Auradon? Why isn't Red on the Isle? The War of Roses. A battle that happened when King Beast wanted to unite all the kingdoms into Auradon. Wonderland didn't want to unite, so King Beast locked up the rabbit hole and forgot about Wonderland. Even more than he forgot about the Isle of the Lost. And it wasn't even remembered by Ben. The only one who remembered Wonderland is Uma. But that isn't the beginning of the story. The story begins at an unparty, because of course it does. After all, birthdays and parties of all sorts are illegal, so the Queen of Hearts has decreed. Who did you think Red is the villain kid of, if not the Queen of Hearts? Red is the guest of highest honor, and therefore having the least amount of fun. Fun isn't really allowed either. What else isn't allowed? Let's see, laughing before noon and jokes told any day but Sunday, Red's outfit that makes her look like a troublemaker, and sweets. Especially the flamingo feathered cupcakes Queen of Hearts sees out on the party table. Just the sight of them makes her hostile, but she wants the sight of the other treats to show her subjects what they don't need. But that doesn't mean they won't try. Out of the corner of her eye, Red notices a boy sneaking some treats. Unfortunately, so does the Queen, demanding the tables to be taken away, and the boy. On the Isle of the Lost, they survived on Auradon's leftovers. In Wonderland, they waste leftovers. Queen of Hearts has to show Red how to be the ruler of Wonderland, to be ruthless and vicious and cruel. How to be her. She has to prepare Red for the annual tea ceremony coming up, for Red to give her first royal decree. It is quite clear to be summer here in Wonderland, with the tea ceremony being the closing of the season, but school runs all year long in Wonderland. And though Red is homeschooling in the movie, in the book she is attending Wonderland High. Though it might be the things that happen because of Wonderland High that Queen of Hearts decides to homeschool her daughter, because Red needs a boy. No, not like that. At least, not yet. Chester seems to appear out of thin air in the corner of Red's science class, much like a familiar cat. Professor Maddox, son of Mad Hatter, asks him to be Red's lab partner, and with a grin, Chester agrees. Red is surprised he so easily likes her after he teases she must be blue, what with her hair so red, as she jokes back that her mother actually almost named her Alice. But it's because Chester never really found his own role, while Red is being shoved into a role she doesn't even want. Red wants to rebel, she wants to sneak out, she wants to take things like her mother's attention, to defy her. She wants to light up this place in a way it's never been before. Red wants to be a little naughty, just like Mal, but for the exact opposite reasons. So when Chester shows up at her castle that night, Red doesn't even hesitate to sneak out with him. Of course it doesn't hurt that he has a friend with him, all dark eyes and curly hair. Ace. He doesn't belong to any of the famous Wonderland families that we know, but he just might begin to belong to Red's heart. Ace is the one who comes up with the idea of throwing a party, a real party. Of course, none of them know how to throw a party. All that's ever been heard about parties is from Auradon. Not that any of them know anything about Auradon either. They split up that night with only the idea to throw their party in the royal woods. Ace's idea. It's pretty clear Ace and Red already have chemistry between them. They might be throwing a real party, but he's calling her an un-princess. Queen of Hearts is determined to make Red a real princess. From now until the tea ceremony, she will be dismissed from 5th period on so that she can have royal training at the castle. She leaves Red in the hand of 2 ladies of the court, Twee and Dora. Based on their names alone, it's a pretty good guess they belong to the families of Tweedledee and Dormouse. And during their first training with Red, they make it clear to her that they, and every member of Wonderland, are watching Queen's every move, and they have some critiques on them. In training Red, they don't want to have to critique every single one of her moves. But Red only wants to move forward with her party, so she allows Chester to convince her to ditch the next day's training. The 2 of them meet Ace, whom Chester knows Red is crushing on, in the Royal Woods, where he's found the perfect party spot. And together with her 2 new friends, Red begins taking the party planning seriously, feeling much as her mother must with planning the tea ceremony. They even settle on the time for the party. It's the night after tomorrow. As for tonight, on her way home, Red overhears Twee and Dora leaving the castle after being stood up by her for training. Their insults sting a little, but she doesn't have time to think of that. She has to think of an excuse for her mother. She ends up just telling Queen of Hearts she missed training to work on a project for Maddox's class. It's a good excuse. She had, after all, done a project in his class in Chester the same day he introduced her to Ace, a potions project wherein they made each other both shrink and grow. And of course, the Queen believes her. But she can't miss another day of training to become just like her. Maybe Red is becoming a little too like the Queen. She spends the next morning at school passing out invitations she made for the party, signed Wonderland Party Commission. But she's almost caught by Duchess, the head mistress of Wonderland High, and a character who is not in the Disney animations, but in the books, while having lunch with Chester. She has to act quick to stop Duchess from finding a stray invitation, so she uses her authority as the Princess of Wonderland to distract the head mistress, letting Duchess know her mother needs her to answer her RSVP to the tea ceremony. Chester grabs the invitation out of Duchess's hand. He later tells Red she'd sounded just like her mom, but she was just acting. The act continues at training, when Queen of Hearts sits in to make sure Red doesn't sit out. After sitting through her instructor's insult Chester, a Cheshire boy who can't be trusted, she has to act like her mom once again to get through the training. She exercises her powers as the princess against the frog butlers who'd been ordered by Queen of Hearts to serve red oysters, her least favorite food. The Queen is proud of this act and declares that at the next day's training she wants to hear Red's first decree. And she wants it to be ruthless. Red asks if she has to which the Queen simply replies, "I thought you had it in you to be just like me." But it's the morning of the party when Ace tells Red he's proud of her for rebelling. But he ends up by calling her princess, a real princess, and her reply is, "Not you too." The party is set to happen that night, but up first are both school and royal training. School is weird. Professor Maddox has an extra twinkle in his eyes and lets the class off without any homework, something unheard of in Wonderland. As he says, it's a good weekend to try something new. Speaking of something new, Red's decree is to thwack any unsanctioned plant. No mercy. Of course, though, she's going to have to do better than that. Royal training is disappointing. But Red is determined their party won't be. Heading to their clearing in the Royal Woods, she runs into Ace, quite literally. They're both quite flustered, of course, but he manages to tell her she looks nice. They meet up with Chester in the clearing, but neither one tells him he looks nice, mostly because they're a bit distracted by how lackluster the party looks. Nobody is even showing up, it seems, until they hear the voices coming. The kids of Wonderland High are curious about the invitations they got, as Alice had been curious of everything during her time in Wonderland. But as soon as the first 3 to arrive see Red, they immediately believe it to be a trap. Ace is the one who convinces them to stay and have a little pizza. Red is the one who wishes they had music to play, if only it wasn't banned on Wonderland, just as parties are banned. As soon as their little party finally seems to get rolling, a group of soldier cards roll in. Most of the kids get away, but the Wonderland Party Commission are all caught and taken back to the Queen. Red is the last to see her mother. She's already sent Ace and Chester home without any consequences. Red doesn't get any consequences either, only hurtful words. It's weak to have friends, only a harsh laugh, because that wasn't a real party Red was having. She wanted to make a difference. But there is none to be had in the capital. The only difference is in Bramble Bay. Up to this point in the story, we've only heard about Bramble Bay in passing. Chester's family is from Bramble Bay, the place so far away from the castle that the queen can't see what's happening there. But Red has to. She has to know what the difference is. So she finds Chester and Ace in their little treehouse village the next morning, and together they come up with a plan to get to Bramble Bay. They need a car, they need maps, they need to get past the royal guard, and they need to do all of this without Queen of Hearts getting suspicious. The common denominator is Duchess. She still hasn't responded to her RSVP to the tea ceremony, which really does have the Queen upset. Red goes to her office demanding an answer written on her special stationery. She uses yet another distraction from Chester to take a disguise and extra stationery to write out an excuse for her mom. And Chester has a way to borrow Duchess's car. Red, Chester, and Ace arrive in Bramble Bay after making it through Tulgey Wood and past the guards, the three all impressed with one another's performances. Not nearly as impressed as they are with Bramble Bay, a magical place where Red feels a sense of anonymity. The kids plan for their time in Bramble Bay about as well as they plan their party, with Ace being the only one to have an idea on a place to stay, Turtle Inn. They arrive at about dusk time, looking like the strangers that they are, and the innkeeper questions them on where they're from and what they're doing. Chester comes up with a lie on where they're from, but it isn't a lie when he tells the innkeeper who his family is. The innkeeper's reply being that Charlotte Cheshire doesn't have much family to speak of. When Ace later asks how Chester was able to make up a name the innkeeper recognized, Chester tells him Charlotte really is his aunt. The kids didn't plan any in the way of eating. The capital of Wonderland, where they are from, doesn't offer much in the way of eating out. Meals are always taken quietly at home. But here in Bramble Bay, they find a cafe, the Bread and Butterfly, and they are surprised to find it crowded and loud with live music. That thing that's banned in Wonderland? Soda is also banned, but they find that too, and all three try a root beer. Apparently, it's Chester's entire life goal to try root beer. If only that's all they find in Bramble Bay, or maybe I mean if only they aren't found. A girl who looks vaguely familiar to Red comes up to their table demanding to know where they're from and what they are doing there. Of course, she recognizes the Princess of Wonderland, and she accuses them of spying for the Queen. Red can't really convince her that she isn't, but she leaves at Red's request. She's just trying to enjoy dinner with her friends. She's trying to enjoy everything about Bramble Bay, including the bay. Red has never seen the sea before. Her mother hates it because she can't control it, but it draws Red right in. So at first light, the next day, she runs to the window of her hotel room and lays her eyes upon it for the first time. She doesn't want to take her eyes off, not even at breakfast with the boys, as they discuss their next move. The kids are in agreement that they need to talk to the people of Bramble Bay to figure out just what it is that makes it so different, so they head back out in Duchess's roadster. But they don't make it very far before backing straight into a cart, dumping all of its contents in the backseat all over Red. Oysters, of course. The owner of the cart is very understanding of them, and they immediately offer to help clean up. The girl from the night before comes over surprised and offers to help as well. Red replies, "Be our guest." But Red has just proved to this girl that she's not here on the Queen's account. In fact, she's nothing like her mother. The girl apologizes and introduces herself as Dee. And suddenly Red knows why she looks familiar. She's the twin sister of Twee. I'm sure you were wondering earlier why I specifically stated Twee to be family to Tweedledee as opposed to his twin Tweedledum. The answer is Dee. Dee asks again why Red and the boys are in Bramble Bay, and this time Red knows she can be honest. Upon telling Red the Wonderland Party Commission is looking for inspiration, they're told Bramble Bay doesn't throw parties, only shindigs. She invites them to one happening that very night, and she sends them to her friend, who can fix the dent the oyster cart puts on the roadster. We're about halfway through Beyond the Isle of the Lost's story now, and to the point of its most glaring issue. You will never believe just who Dee's friend is. Maybe you don't recognize the name on its own, but his coworker is named Harry, and they just so happen to be the sons of Jasper and Horace. Recognize those names? Cruella's henchmen? On the Isle of the Lost, where the villains and their sidekicks were all sent off, Jace and Harry are even in the very first Isle of the Lost book. because they themselves were on the Isle. An impossibility if they're in Wonderland now. In the very first chapter of Beyond the Isle of the Lost, Red states that the Rabbit's Hole has been locked up since King Beast united the kingdoms into Auradon. Nobody could get in or out. Jace says it himself that he's been separated from his friends on the Isle since then, but, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the very beginning of Descendants Rise of Red, one of the very first lines, Uma says it's been 30 years since King Beast united Auradon. Jace's friend back on the Isle was none other than Carlos DeVille himself. Jace and Harry were in the same grade as Carlos at Dragon Hall, in high school. But in the first Descendants movie, taking place just weeks after the first Isle of the Lost, Mal says it's been 20 years since King Beast united Auradon. That might be a 10-year gap between the movies, but Carlos was only 15 when he went to Auradon with Mal and the others. How can Jace and Harry have been stuck in Wonderland for 30 years, but also have been on the Isle 10 years before? Harry tells the three friends that some things wash up on the shore of Wonderland, one of Bramble Bay's best-kept secrets from the Queen. It would have made a lot more sense if it was Harry and Jace who had washed up, instead of something like a fiddle. As it is, having them in two places at once is an impossible oversight. I am not quite sure who this oversight falls on. As mentioned before, Rise of Red was in the hands of new writers, but Melissa de la Cruz has been writing the Isle of the Lost books for the past 10 years, and originally wrote the characters of Jace and Harry herself. And with all the other oversights I've seen throughout the books, I can't help but wonder how they've all made it past editing. But getting past that, Jace knows of another way out of Wonderland. He and Harry have plans to get to Auradon and bring Dee with them. I wonder how he'll feel once he's heard about Carlos. I wonder if he already knows. He did know Carlos, didn't he? All they have to do is make it to the Pool of Tears and simply swim until they're there. Red and the boys finish up at Jace's and take the roadster back to the inn so they can meet up with Dee for the shindig. At first it seems she's not going to meet up with them, as if maybe she's the one tricking them. But as they meet her and follow her through the town, it becomes evident that Bramble Bay still has to live in secrecy. They have to hide their parties for shindigs. They have to hide their dancing. And as much as Red wants to try to dance at the shindig, she's just not sure she can. The people here still can't live freely because of her mom. She can't fix that. She doesn't even belong. Not even as Dee gives her with a bag of music tapes that had washed up on the shore. It's a tea ceremony gift, which reminds Red of her royal training with Dee's twin sister. Red assures her that Twee is fine, but she isn't, not really. She's scared, terrified of becoming a soldier card in Queen of Hearts' army. So she became a lady of the court instead, never considering there could be a third option, not even as she had made a plan with Dee to get away and live their lives freely. She'd just been too terrified. And speaking of the soldier cards, they're on their way now, and that's the Wonderland Party Commission's cue to go. They run back to the inn and jump into the roadster, ready to take off, but Chester can't leave just yet. He runs inside, leaving Red to wait behind in the driver's seat until he comes back with their disguises to get them back past the Royal Guard. And then they all three say goodbye to magical Bramble Bay. When they make it safely back home, Chester tells Red why he really had to run back into the inn, to leave a letter for his aunt. And the next morning, Red wakes back up in her own bed as if she's never left, and her story continues. They still have to throw a party. Queen of Hearts is still so stressed about her party or tea ceremony, and announces to Red that she has to take a short trip to look at tea sets, and she won't be back until the day before the tea ceremony. Red runs to the boys' treehouse village, calling an emergency meeting of the Wonderland Party Commission, because they now have 3 days to throw the party of all parties in the castle. Red, Chester, and Ace pull out all the stops this time. They find a chef for the food who wishes he could use sugar to rebel. They find someone with an old boombox who will DJ the party. Red sends missives out to all the soldier cards telling them they must vacate the castle, and spends all day decorating it to the nines. And on the invitations, they tell all the Wonderland High kids to wear something they've never been able to before. She already knows what she'll wear. And in her final day of royal training, she realizes that Twee and Dora are just unhappy. And so she orders them, as their princess, to sit on the floor with her. Another thing that's been banned in Wonderland. Even though it's not supposed to be their last day of training, she informs them that it's her decision to make. She wants them to know that they can make their own decisions. They can think for themselves. They can be anything they want to be. But Twee won't leave her hometown, not like some people. Still, Red gives them a chance to make their own decision by inviting them to her party as she thanks them for the training they've given her. And the very next night is the night. It's the night for Red to finally wear something she made for herself so long ago. A dress that's not in the coloring of Wonderland, but pink instead. And when she meets Ace in the Grand Hall, he's even more flustered than the night of their first attempt at a party. He still manages to stutter out just how nice she looks as he shows her the surprise he's made. A disco ball. It lights the entire Grand Hall in tiny little sparkles. Perfect for the kind of party to shake Wonderland up. And it does. Wonderland will never be the same after this night. As the guests start arriving, it seems that it's every kid in the capital who shows up. And they're all wearing color. Not the white or gray or red of Wonderland. Red sees yellow and blue and glitter. She sees jewelry, and even Twee and Dora show up wearing colorfully braided friendship bracelets. And when the music begins, Red starts the party by asking Ace to help her to dance. It's awkward at first as the two try to teach each other and the others, but as the kids of Wonderland join in, it slowly becomes just the two of them. Just Ace and Red underneath the sparkles of the disco ball until all the lights come on and it's the Queen of Hearts. There's only a single moment's worth of hesitation before the Grand Hall clears out. All except for the Wonderland Party Commission, 3 kids terrified for their lives. Red takes their hands and leads them through one of the many hidden passages that lead out of the castle and away from the Queen. She knows her mother will have her soldier cards follow them, so she takes the boys through the old servant tunnels, the ones rumored to hold things that will kill them. They make it through the tunnels and into the wilderness, where they decide on a life on the run to the one place that might get them out of Wonderland, the Pool of Tears. But they never make it there. The 3 kids split up to keep each other safe as Queen of Hearts' armored guards comes after them. What Red doesn't know is that Ace and Chester made a plan to keep her safe above all else. Still, when the 2 boys are caught, Red abandons her plan to get to the Pool of Tears to go after them instead. She comes across a work camp and demands a horse from the workers there. They don't take her seriously until she shows them she's worth being taken seriously. She rides their horse all the way back to the hedge maze surrounding the castle and sends him back to his owners. Then she overtakes a soldier card so she can take his armor for her disguise to get into the castle. It isn't until she picks the lock of his helmet with a bobby pin that Red recognizes him. It's the boy from the very beginning, the one who got caught sneaking treats at the unparty. He doesn't recognize her or where he is. He has no memories of having ever been a soldier card, only a boy who wanted something sweet. Red makes it into the castle in her disguise and down to the dungeon where she finds the boys, upset she didn't get out of Wonderland when she had the chance. Red orders them as princess to escape with her, but of course they're caught. It was the trap the Queen had laid for her daughter all along, and now the 3 are locked up in the dungeon together. But the tea ceremony is still set to happen, and so the Queen has to let them out. Ace takes hold of Red's hand as they head up to the castle together until she is once again separated from her friends. Red is forced to get ready for the tea ceremony while she worries over what will happen to the boys. When she is led out to that tea ceremony, Red sees that she's been made up to look just like Queen of Hearts. She herself is a heart. Still, she won't live like this. She won't let the Queen force her to live like this. She begs her mother to punish her and let the boys go. But performing at this tea ceremony is the worst punishment she could endure. The Queen won't hurt Ace and Chester, and besides, they'll be there soon enough, and sure enough, they are, wheeled out on a platform. The boys hardly look at Red before Queen of Hearts turns them into a spectacle right in front of her devoted crowd. Or should I say, turns Chester into the Cheshire Cat he's always been, and Ace into a soldier card. The Queen has been right the entire time. Having friends makes you weak, because Red just lost the best of them. And now the story does end, in the middle of Red giving her first decree, written by Queen of Hearts herself. This is where Beyond the Isle of Lost is different from the first 4 written by Melissa de la Cruz. They all follow the same storylines, Mal's, but each story has a concrete ending. Isle of the Lost ends with Mal having found Maleficent's scepter. Return ends with all 4 core BKs finding their parents' talismans. Rise ends with the BKs getting the trident back for Arabella, and Escape ends with the BK's graduation. Mal, Evie, Jay, and even Carlos all got to end their stories. while Beyond the Isle of the Lost leaves much to be desired. The only characters who seem to get an ending are Ace and Chester. They're not in the follow-up movie. They're not mentioned at all. It's almost as if, in the movie, their story never even happened. The story that takes place in Rise of Red is, of course, Red's, but it's also Cindy's, daughter of Cinderella. And it's the entire backstory of Auradon, which, if you ask me, wasn't even needed. We've had the backstory of Auradon this entire time. Long, long ago. Well, more like 20 years ago. Beast united up all of the kingdoms, all of the fairy tales that had already happened. He took the villains and their sidekicks and booted them off to the Isle of the Lost. And if the villains had died in their fairy tale, he brought them back to life to live out their punishments. With no magic, no Wi-Fi, and no way out. But we see Ella living out her fairy tale while going to high school with Bridget, the Queen of Hearts. And we see some of the villains. And don't even get me started on them being called VKs throughout the movie, when the only mentioned VK is Morgie, son of Morgana, going to high school too. Riddle me this, though. How can Hades, a god of ancient Greece, and Maleficent, a fairy who lives out 100 years while her rival princess is asleep, be at a modernish day high school? If Ella and Bridget, the moms of two 16-year-olds, are there as 16-year-olds, then it couldn't have been more than 40 years or so in Auradon's past. Or whatever it was before it was Auradon. And as I'm poking holes in Auradon's backstory, I've got to bring up Dr. Facilier, who we know to be on the Isle of the Lost with his daughter Celia. If the backstory of King Beast uniting all the kingdoms is true, how does it work out for Princess Tiana's kingdom, a real-life city in the United States? I went to New Orleans just last year, and I can confirm it wasn't an Auradon. I don't think the Great Wall of China is either, or Denmark, where Prince Eric lives, or France, where Beast and Belle are from. This movie just pokes way too many holes in the Auradon universe. I don't even want to get started on the whole time travel paradox. There's only one hint, and Beyond the Isle of the Lost, pointing towards the time travel story of Red's. The last class she attends of Professor Maddox's before the party and tea ceremony, before he evidently begins homeschooling her, Maddox teaches on the fourth dimension, time travel. Time travel is too paradoxy to make sense. If Red truly saves Bridget from falling into evil, shouldn't that mean she saves Wonderland as a whole? This isn't something we see. We see that Red is still being invited to Auradon Prep by Uma, as if Wonderland is still separated from Auradon in this new dimension. We don't even get to see Chester and Ace come back. We don't get to see what could be with Red and Ace. But maybe we don't need to. And even though I hope the next movie will bring them back, maybe we don't need to. While Red's mom sings life is sweeter in the past, we see this small moment where Red might just be attracted to Prince Charming. It's clear to me that she has an attraction for boys with curly hair and dark eyes, especially after reading the book. But after reading the movie, it seems she might just have a thing for girls with curly hair and dark eyes as well. And maybe we'll see more of that later on. After all, you didn't think this was the end of the story, did you? Speaking of stories, I mentioned at the end of last month's Descendants video that Boo Boo Stewart had read my Descendants fanfiction back in 2015. On June 22nd of 2024, I got to meet Boo Boo Stewart in person and give him my story. The novel that I wrote and self-published. Of course, I autographed it with a note that was inspired by his words about my fanfiction. And as he flipped through the novel after looking at the note, he said some more inspiring words. So let me get this right. You wrote this book, and you drew the cover, and you had it printed, and you did it all on your own? Of course, I told him I did each part of it, and he told me how impressed and touched he was, and once again, to keep up the good writing. Next up are Sophia Carson and Dove Cameron. I will meet them one day and let them know how much they inspire me too. Stay tuned if you'd like to see Disney Plus's touching tribute to Cameron Boyce.
It's what Carlos would have wanted. So don't do it for me. Do it in honor of him.